There is a pervasive assumption that reaching middle age guarantees a period of severe psychological decline. Popular culture insists that somewhere between the ages of 40 and 60, an internal biological clock triggers an inevitable period of distress, deep existential panic, and erratic behavior. Looking at this plotted data from developmental research by psychologists like Margie Lockman, the universality of this event breaks down. The data shows an expected 100% trendline of adult turbulence, but the empirical reality is a stark anomaly. Only about 26% of adults actually report experiencing anything resembling this crisis. For that minority, the distress is rarely driven by an innate developmental biological clock. It is almost always precipitated by acute external stressors. The clusters form around distinct environmental triggers: sudden health issues, acute financial insecurity, or massive career failures. The manifestation of this distress also splinters along demographic lines. Men disproportionately report deep dissatisfaction with their career trajectories and financial standing, while women more frequently report distress linked to shifting family roles and the societal pressures of aging. The midlife crisis is a socially constructed narrative. By applying a universal clinical label to a highly specific set of external stressors, we pathologize normal life transitions and generate undue anxiety for adults passing through midlife. To understand how adult psychological maturation actually functions, researchers have to discard the myth of the midlife crisis and rely on rigorous frameworks that map the entire human lifespan. For decades, the historical baseline for human maturation was Sigmund Freud's psychosexual model. Its primary limitation was its timeline. Freud's framework assumed that personality development essentially halted at puberty. Developmental psychology required a broader lens.
Erik Erikson revolutionized the field by theorizing that maturation does not stop in adolescence. It extends through the entire human lifespan, continuing well into old age. Erikson proposed that personality grows through the negotiation of social and cultural conflicts. This shifted the focus from biological drives to the influence of relationships and identity formation. This chart outlines Erikson's 8 stages of psychosocial development. This framework serves as the fundamental matrix for understanding how human beings mature over a lifetime. Each stage in Erikson's model forces a specific psychosocial crisis. An individual must resolve that central conflict to achieve healthy ego growth. Successfully navigating the crisis results in the acquisition of a specific psychological strength, or virtue. To accurately analyze the psychological turbulence of middle adulthood, we can discard the pop psychology of the midlife crisis entirely. Instead, we must examine the specific psychosocial conflict defined in Erikson's later stages. Look at the middle age row on this table. This is stage 7, ages 40 to 65. The central conflict hinges on generativity, an intense psychological drive to create or build something that outlasts the individual, making a permanent mark. Empirically, generativity expresses itself in highly tangible ways. It manifests as raising children, providing professional mentorship, taking on community leadership roles, or producing significant creative output. Successfully navigating this conflict yields the virtue of care. The adult develops a productive, outward-facing focus on society, securing a sense of deep personal fulfillment. The opposing pathological force is stagnation. This occurs when an individual feels unproductive, disconnected from their community, or professionally thwarted. Acute stagnation presents with severe psychological symptoms. Individuals experience intense self-absorption, a complete lack of personal growth, restlessness, and profound feelings of emptiness. Returning to the data from earlier, what popular culture mislabels as a midlife crisis is, in clinical terms, a severe bout of psychosocial stagnation. Adult distress represents a failure of psychosocial adaptation, but resolving stagnation and achieving generativity brings up a new problem. To continue developing, a self-actualized adult requires a different set of internal drivers. Abraham Maslow mapped the motivational architecture of adults who have successfully resolved these foundational crises. Maslow established a baseline of deficiency needs, or D needs. These include hunger, safety, and basic esteem. D needs operate on a simple mechanism. They drive an individual to act solely to alleviate a perceived deficit and restore equilibrium. Once all D needs are satisfied, a highly advanced developmental state emerges, metamotivation, or being needs. It is the active pursuit of ultimate inherent potential, driven by a desire for concepts like wholeness, justice, beauty, and truth. To operate at this level, self-actualizing adults must dedicate themselves to a vocation, a duty, or a destiny that exists completely outside of themselves. This bridges the gap between Maslow and Erikson. The pursuit of these being needs provides the exact psychological fuel required to sustain Erikson's state of generativity over decades. If a self-actualized adult fails to satisfy these high-level metaneeds, they suffer a unique psychological stunting called metapathology. This manifests as deep alienation, cynicism, and a failure to utilize their full potential. Mature adult psychology is never static. Avoiding the despair of metapathology requires the active, continuous pursuit of metamotivation. Looking at the final row of Erikson's table, we find stage 8. This marks the entry into late adulthood, typically defined as ages 65 and up. The goal of this final stage is ego integrity. This is the profound acceptance of one's unique, unalterable life cycle. The individual finds coherence, wholeness, and purpose in their past experiences. The opposing threat is despair. This surfaces as deep bitterness over poor past decisions, regret over unachieved goals, and a resulting terror of impending mortality. There is a common academic misconception that ego integrity is a permanent, unbroken state of tranquility. The data does not support this. Healthy late-life psychology operates as a dialectic. Individuals constantly alternate between states of deep integrity and sudden, sharp moments of despair. The resulting virtue of this stage is wisdom. Wisdom is not the absence of despair. It is the cognitive ability to balance that despair against integrity to achieve ultimate psychological closure. Early 20th century developmental theories left a critical demographic period largely unmapped: extreme old age, encompassing those 80 years and older. After Erikson's death, his wife Joan expanded the psychosocial model, introducing the 9th stage. Its core mechanism is radical. Severe physical decline forces the elderly to revisit their earliest psychosocial conflicts, but in reverse order. As physical capabilities deteriorate, the aging adult is suddenly reintroduced to the early childhood crisis of autonomy versus shame and doubt. They must navigate feelings of helplessness as their independence vanishes. Simultaneously, an increasing reliance on medical professionals and family caregivers re-triggers the very first infancy crisis: trust versus mistrust. The 9th stage strips away all external societal roles, illustrating that human development involves an unyielding internal negotiation of psychological tension until the final moments of life. The midlife crisis is a myth. Adulthood is not a biological peak followed by an inevitable turbulent decline. True psychological maturation requires navigating the tension of generativity, actively pursuing metamotivation, and ultimately fighting for ego integrity in the face of physical decline. Ultimately, the human lifespan is a continuous, dynamic negotiation of identity and meaning. Developmental evolution never truly stops.